Every story we tell is a journey, a thrilling adventure that will keep you hooked from start to finish. Before we begin, let us know where you're watching from. We love seeing our community come together from all around the world. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Tomorrow, we have a special story just for you. Trust us, you won't want to miss it. See you on the next adventure. Tourists stopped at Buckingham Palace. The reason will shock you. The sky over Buckingham Palace was a perfect shade of blue, with the afternoon sun casting long shadows over the grand gates. Tourists buzzed with excitement, cameras in hand, eager to capture a memory with the iconic royal guards standing motionless in their crisp red uniforms and tall bearskin hats. Among the visitors was a large group of American tourists, traveling together on a guided tour. For many, this was their first time in London, and getting a photo with the royal guards was at the top of their list. "All right, guys, let's get in position," one of the group members, James Carter, a 42-year-old businessman, called out. His wife, Anna, chuckled as she adjusted her sunglasses. "Don't stand too close. I heard they don't like that," she reminded him. The group laughed, but everyone knew the unspoken rules. No touching the guards. No blocking their movements. No shouting or acting out of line. One by one, they took turns posing, smiling wide as their cameras clicked. The royal guards remained stoic, their expressions unreadable, their posture unshakable despite the bustling crowd. It was a picture-perfect moment, something to look back on and say, "I was there." Then, it was James and Anna's turn. They stepped forward, making sure to keep a respectful distance as they posed. James held up his phone. One more for good measure. But just as he was about to snap another picture, something unexpected happened. From the side, a uniformed police officer emerged, his face set in a serious expression. He raised a hand in a firm gesture. "Step back. Everyone, stop where you are." The group froze, their smiles disappearing. A few exchanged confused glances. Had they done something wrong? Nobody had crossed the line. Nobody had tried to touch the guards. Yet, the officer's presence and firm tone made it clear. Something serious was happening. And the tourists had no idea what was coming next. The air grew tense as the uniformed officer stepped forward, his expression firm and unreadable. "Step back. Everyone, stop where you are." His voice cut through the chatter, replacing the once light-hearted atmosphere with a wave of confusion. James Carter, still holding his phone mid-photo, slowly lowered his arm, exchanging a puzzled glance with his wife. "What's going on?" someone from the group whispered. At first, the tourists thought it was a misunderstanding. Had they accidentally broken a rule? They had been careful to follow the guidelines. No touching the guards. No shouting. No disruptions. So why was a police officer suddenly stepping in? The group instinctively took a step back, as instructed, their excitement now replaced with uncertainty. The officer's eyes scanned the group, as if looking for something, or someone. And then, a second officer appeared, this time from behind the crowd. The tension grew heavier. This wasn't a simple request for space. Something was wrong. One of the younger tourists, Emily, a college student, hesitated before whispering, "Maybe it's just crowd control?" But deep down, everyone knew. This wasn't normal. Other tourists around them began noticing the commotion, some even pulling out their phones to record, sensing that something unusual was unfolding. Yet, the royal guards didn't move an inch. They remained in their rigid stance, eyes fixed straight ahead, as if completely unfazed by the growing tension around them. That's when the first officer finally spoke again, his tone carrying unmistakable urgency. "Everyone stay where you are. We need to verify something immediately." James' stomach dropped. Verify what? Was someone in their group in trouble? Had they been mistaken for someone else? The police weren't raising their voices. They weren't panicked. But the way they moved, calculated, precise, controlled, told James one thing. This wasn't random. Something, or someone, in their group had caught the attention of law enforcement. And whatever it was, the situation was far more serious than anyone had expected. The once excited group of tourists now stood frozen, uncertainty hanging in the air. The two uniformed officers had positioned themselves strategically, one at the front, the other behind the crowd, effectively surrounding the group. This wasn't crowd control. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was something serious. James Carter exchanged a nervous glance with his wife, Anna. Neither of them had ever been in a situation like this before. A few feet away, Emily, the college student, shifted uneasily. "This is really weird," she whispered. One of the officers, a tall man with sharp eyes, took a slow but deliberate step forward. He spoke calmly, but his tone left no room for argument. "We need everyone in this group to remain where you are while we conduct an identification check." A murmur rippled through the group. Identification check? This was just a sightseeing tour, why would the police suddenly need to check IDs? James' heart began to race. Had someone in the group done something wrong? Was this a case of mistaken identity? Or worse, was someone among them hiding something? The crowd outside their group had started paying attention, with some tourists raising their phones to record the unusual scene. It wasn't every day that a group of seemingly innocent visitors was singled out for an investigation right in front of Buckingham Palace. Anna nervously adjusted the strap of her purse. "Maybe it's just a security precaution," she whispered, though her voice wasn't entirely convinced. But James could tell, this wasn't random. The officers weren't looking at the entire group. Their eyes kept flicking toward one person in particular. A man standing toward the back of their group, slightly apart from the others. He was dressed like any other tourist, jeans, a dark jacket, sunglasses perched on his head. James hadn't noticed him before, but now that he was paying attention, something felt off. The man hadn't said a word since the officers arrived. He hadn't moved. Hadn't questioned what was happening. And the way the police subtly positioned themselves near him. It was clear. They were here for him. James swallowed hard, realization creeping in. Something was very, very wrong. The air around Buckingham Palace felt heavier than ever. The once jovial group of tourists now stood still, their excitement completely replaced by a growing sense of unease. James Carter's gaze flicked back to the man standing at the edge of their group, the one the officer seemed so focused on. Something about him just didn't feel right. The officers hadn't outright accused him of anything, not yet. But their tightened stances, the way their hands hovered near their radios, it was clear. They weren't taking any chances. One of the officers finally broke the silence. "Sir, we need to see your identification. Now." The man hesitated. That was the first sign. A normal tourist would have immediately complied. But this man? He stood there, rigid, as if weighing his options. The group began whispering, confusion turning into genuine fear. Emily, the college student, nudged James' arm, her voice barely above a whisper. "Who is he? Is he even part of our group?" James swallowed hard. He had assumed the man was just another traveler, someone who had booked the same tour as them. But now, standing there, watching him stall for time, he wasn't so sure. Then, the officer's voice grew sharper. "Sir, I won't ask again. Show me your identification." The man's jaw clenched. For a brief moment, the entire square seemed to hold its breath. Then, he moved. Not toward his pocket. Not toward his passport. Instead, he turned sharply, attempting to walk away. That was all the officers needed. In an instant, the officer closest to him lunged forward, grabbing his arm in a practiced motion. The man tried to resist, jerking back, but the second officer was already there. In mere seconds, they had him pinned, face down, against the cold pavement. The crowd gasped, some stepping back in shock, others pulling out their phones. James and the rest of the tour group stared in stunned silence. Then, the first officer reached into his radio and muttered a code. A voice crackled back. James didn't catch all of it, but one word sent a chill down his spine. Interpol. His breath hitched. Interpol? What had they just witnessed? Who was this man? And more importantly, what exactly had he done? The moment the man was pinned to the ground, the energy in the square shifted completely. No one was laughing. No one was posing for photos anymore. Instead, tourists stared in stunned silence, their phones raised, capturing what was no longer a casual sightseeing trip, but a full-blown international arrest. James Carter's heart pounded as he exchanged glances with his wife, Anna. Neither of them had ever expected to be caught in something like this. The officers worked swiftly, keeping the man restrained as they muttered into their radios. One of them reached into the suspect's jacket and pulled out a wallet and a folded document. The officer quickly flipped through the contents before locking eyes with his partner. The expression on his face said it all. This wasn't just a random security check. This was serious. A few seconds later, a third officer arrived, dressed in a different uniform, one James immediately recognized as belonging to a higher-ranking official. The new arrival spoke briefly with the arresting officers, nodding as he examined the suspect's identification. Then, with a deep sigh, he turned to address the crowd. "I apologize for the disruption, but I need everyone to understand that this was a necessary intervention." The tourists remained frozen, waiting for him to continue. The officer's gaze settled on James' tour group. "The individual we just apprehended is wanted by Interpol for ongoing international investigations. We appreciate your cooperation." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Interpol? An international fugitive had been standing right next to them this entire time? James felt a chill run down his spine. Had he stood next to a criminal for the last half hour without realizing it? Anna instinctively grabbed his hand, her grip tight. Emily, the college student, finally spoke up, her voice shaky. "Oh my God, that guy was traveling with us." The officer nodded grimly. "Not anymore." As the officers lifted the suspect to his feet, placing cuffs securely around his wrists, the reality sank in for everyone watching. This wasn't just an odd situation at Buckingham Palace. This was a high-stakes, real-life operation, one they had just witnessed firsthand. The royal guards, as always, had remained completely still, unfazed by the chaos unfolding just feet away. But to James, to everyone who had been standing there, this was no longer just a sightseeing moment. It was a story they would tell for the rest of their lives. This was one of the most shocking moments ever captured at Buckingham Palace. What would you have done if you were in that crowd? Would you have noticed something was off? Tell us what you think in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories like this.